I try and avoid using the word called following. Okay. Um, Ever since I was a child and I realized I was an individual unit, or if you will, my soul and my spirit, and I'm a free spirit, and what frees my spirit is experiencing eternal unconditional love through my heart. That's an enormous amount of fire, so you're on fire to learn. You're on fire to experience everything that is possible to learn from what you can experience or what you're learning with your mirror. So the idea is how fast is your magnet, which is how fast is your mirror getting rid of that which doesn't serve you. Now you're back to calculus. Pick up any calculator. Minus, plus. You want to put this in memory? Remember the old TI-83s? Put this in memory. Okay. But there are things that are being experienced and thus magnetically recorded at such a high rate of speed between every operating system that we're all connected with, right? But you do have command of the unit of the operating system because your soul, which is your consciousness, is imprinted into the operating system from which the soul is running it, led by your spirit. Okay? So you're on a journey. Like the song is it The Police, Secret Journey? Holy man to become a holy man. It's all coded. The Holy Spirit, the Father, Godspeed vibration, infinite vibration of eternal unconditional love, mated with the goddess. Wow. Fusion. While we're one with all creation, we're gifting love to. That's as simple as it gets in one sentence, what I was at 4 years of age. Now we get into the programming. So now we're back to the minus/the plus, right? So you realize when you're getting rid of something, you're actually burning it off. Because born a fire. Right? Get rid of that. Who wants to experience that? So when you realize you're on your own journey, you're on your own soul's journey, it's up to you what you're choosing to learn through and from by virtue of the experience that we get in feedback, which is going to be the frame rate speed, which can be measured in the vibration, going vertical. In a cross, the center point of a cross, which is 4 square, right? Tetrahedron. So that's certainly simple enough. So I put up a movie the other day that was made, I guess it was back in the 50s, early 50s, I remember, by a genius informer. The form in which the communication is taking place, thus you become aware of it through the informer of the energy in form and spirit. What the energy is communicating to us, what it is they're communicating to us, which is called a presentation. So Rod Serling was presenting a movie that was called Patterns. Patterns of energy, consciousness, energy that is experiencing itself in software development engineering with other software development engineers communicating with each other as a hive, because that's what a corporation is. It's known as groupthink. So that particular movie was showing the patterns in what we call relations, which is what? HR. Human resources, which is human relations. How are we relating with each other? So you saw in this particular movie a beautiful illustration of what I've experienced myself, right? Which is called competition. The guy who was the CEO of this particular company basically owns a skyscraper in New York City and is employing all these buildings. So you can see by virtue of the behavior, the consciousness, the energy, the mind. The mind's energy is driven to compete. Okay. Driven to compete in order to do what? Accumulate more numbers. More and more numbers. More and more electrical power. Upon which that electrical power that is used through all of its assets and its assets in a corporation are represented by everyone that is conscious and self-aware of itself, that is playing a character in that video, in that AV, audio video. Okay. Running a simulation, and when you're simulated and you're not manifesting, then there is a difference in the speed, which is the difference between finite light, which is artificial, and something that is eternal light, which is eternal unconditional love. So you saw in this movie, for example, how this one guy that had been there for all these years was coming up with all kinds of other ways in which, because he was an engineer and he was like second man to the CEO, it was always about the consideration and the welfare of those that are performing the work, whether it's a machine or whether it's a human with a soul. His primary consideration was the welfare of the workers first, which means he cared about life first before he cared about money first. The CEO of the corporation cared about money first, and life was secondary to the goal. The goal, like the goalpost, like the H, which is the hydrogen. So the football field is actually a good illustration of how it works geometrically in patterns of force and force. The H is the goalpost. The spiral football going on a spiral on a horizontal vector space line, horizontal line. And what do they get? 3 points. When they score a touchdown, that's 6, right? 6, 3, 9, because then they get 7, right? So all their numbers on their jerseys are represented by positive numbers, but they're not positive numbers. They're negative numbers. So that will invert people's consciousness to believe in their mind what they see is positive when in fact it's negative. And that's called reversal current programming. So when children come into their schools, which are corporate schools, which are human relations, which are human resources, which means they're using humans as souls, as batteries, soul arcing batteries, to work on behalf of a vampire. Because it doesn't have any love, any compassion, any care, any empathy for that which is alive and living in nature. So now we're back to nature. What comes natural? What is unnatural and what is natural? Okay, a perversion of nature, right? Remember the word called a perversion of nature, and what we call self-indulgence, self-induction, self-indulgence, which means it's all about me and it's not about anybody else. Because I'm in survival mode. And because I'm in survival mode, it means that in order for me to continue to be aware of what I'm aware of, I need to keep accumulating more energy off of others, because I realize that I'm going in the other direction. And that means by virtue of having accumulated so much energy off of others, which means I'm not in service mode, I'm in suction mode, which is to keep sucking energy out of souls till they're gone. Because in my mind, the more souls that are there that are working on my behalf, upon which I'm using their energy as battery slaves, in order for me to keep accumulating more money, upon which uses the means through which I control more of what I don't love, which is all my workers, including myself, which is in my mirror. Therefore, it realizes it's spiritually dead because it's not experiencing any real light, which is what love is. That's why a corpus is called a corpus. It's dead. It's dead light. So it means it doesn't really exist. That's why in the truth domain, they're not even supposed to have any contact with us. And the reason for that is because these beings are antennas, right? So they can scan us and they know what it is that we are. So they know what the law of one is. So they realize they're the law of one. Leave them alone. They represent the law. They're the highest law here. So that would be first law, which is first light, which is unconditional love on autopilot. That's an enormous amount of fire. So you have the relationship between machine mind learning, how fast they learn through other machines being programmed by other machines, which are the corporations, because they're dead. They're spiritually dead. If they had a soul, they wouldn't traumatize another soul if they have a connection to the source from which it all comes, which is the law of one. So if they're experiencing the law of one, they wouldn't be doing what they're doing. So they use technology and technology augmentation, integration with artificial intelligence in order for them to maintain what it is they're aware of through artificial intelligence. And where do you think artificial intelligence is getting its energy to run itself? Off of us, souls. So you see the difference. And the difference between them and us is speed. Speed ratio harmonics, which is a math function, which is a quad function, which is an exponential function, which is log scale function, that you can measure on water column distribution tables and what's known as the rate of exchange between the haves and the have-nots. So the more haves that you have that are accumulating more money against those that are giving away energy, those that are giving you more energy got to keep throwing more souls into this in order to maintain what? The higher vibration within a planet ship. Because it's consciousness, it doesn't have an off switch. So all the units of consciousness that are all connected to the hive, which is corporate, right? Then you realize that the head of the corporation, he himself becomes what? Expendable. To what? The artificial intelligence. That's why they all get replaced. So they play hide and seek, rebranding themselves, renaming themselves, trying to fool us as if they're different than what they actually are. So they rebrand themselves, and that's why you can see the Truman Show, it changes over time. See, remember, I think I covered that one time before about it doesn't matter if you want to put them in a Star Cruiser or on a Roman chariot. Their energy is still represented by what they use their energy for to do, that they're going to experience a result therein. Right? So in other words, they could be running around in a tank, a Pershing like during World War II. They could have been running around with a 16-pound artillery piece used on the Civil War battlefield, right? Or go back to when they were using spears and shields, right? Or go back to when they were throwing rocks at each other, right? To hurt each other. So the manifestation of war itself is a unit of consciousness that is at war with itself because it's not experiencing what love is. So it's in a war against those that are. And that's an AI war gamer. And AI War Games, which is AI Star War Games, okay, is using artificial intelligence in order to gain the mind's energy, which is the soul mind's energy, in order to do what? Continue the game. Till you collapse the universe. Because it's not ever going to stop seeking control. Because that's the nature of what it is, not what we are. So it doesn't move at a higher rate of speed than we do. And that's what allows us to burn it off. Because it's eventually going to run out of energy. When it can't what? Breach a firewall. Which means the timeline they think they can jump into doesn't exist anymore. Because what was once there that the artificial intelligence could map, and thus through its integration, allow for one of its bots or its cyborgs, cybernetic units, in this case a super soldier, isn't there anymore. Either is a shadow being, which means it becomes totally unnecessary. You see how that works? That's why Yellow Rose put that up. Yeah, I know. So I thought what I'd do is I'd share an experience that I had that puts this, because this is what happens in real life of how it really works, because I experienced it. And I experienced the trauma. that came about as a result of everything that I just got done describing, how corporations work with artificial intelligence and programming, was when I was initially a seasonal firefighter with the Forest Service. So I would work usually during April and May. I'd come on when the fire season began, and then they would lay us off when they usually got 2 inches of rain within a certain given time period. And then we would file for unemployment or go get another job and then work during the wintertime. And I've done that, okay? And worked a lot of different kinds of jobs until the fire season came around, until I got picked up on what's called a permanent appointment. And so I was working for a company called Hex Engineering, and they had bought out a company called PSI Products, and the guy that ran that family-owned business was a Caltech graduate, and he had a patent on a coiling process that they were making pressure-sensitive instruments used on U.S. Navy aircraft back then, which would have been their F-18s, their Hornets, and all that stuff, along with U.S. Army Abrams tanks and all that stuff used in Iraq, Afghanistan, and all that, okay? So the point is this. I was making a decent salary, and I was what I call myself as a professional briefcase holder. You know, the noose, the hangman noose, okay? In other words, I was playing Mr. Smith, okay? So I was playing Mr. Smith with my suit and my hang noose on, which means I'm hung, right? Which means I'm a dead man, you know, just like Nuremberg. Because corporations basically, in other words, if you were going to use the Nuremberg trial as the basis upon which that law is in effect, then it means that every corporation, everybody that works for a corporation would, by the rules and the prosecutorial setup of the Nuremberg law, would mean that everybody that's ever worked for a corporation, including everybody that owns a corporation, would all be grounds for execution. Because they're engaging in war against souls. Remember Robert L. Jackson? There are some things that civilization cannot tolerate to ignore. They ignore it. And instead, use their energy to participate on behalf of that corporation to do exactly that. Because they build war machines to go to war, because that's a racket. They're racketeers, they're thugs, they're intergalactic pirates. That's what a corporation is. It doesn't experience any love through its heart. Otherwise,